Thank you so much for the introduction. Again, thank you also for accommodating the last minute change. My colleague Amanda was really looking forward to being here today, but as mentioned, something came up yesterday, so unfortunately you'll have to hear from me. So as it was mentioned, I'm here to talk to you today about the innovation that's happening in Ontario's food banks with the ongoing use of Link2Feed and our partnership with Ontario 211. First, I thought it would be helpful to provide a little bit of background information on food banks in Ontario. Feed Ontario, which was formerly known as the Ontario Association of Food Banks, is a network of 1,200 hunger relief agencies across the province. This includes large-scale distribution centers, community food pantries, breakfast clubs, school meal programs, community food centers, emergency shelters, and senior centers. Our role at Feed Ontario is to support the provincial food bank network through fresh and non-perishable food distribution, as well as through poverty research and advocacy for long-term solutions to income security and hunger. To provide a little bit of background on food banks themselves, I think many of us have an idea of what a food bank is in our mind, and often picture the non-perishable food boxes that might have taken place when we were in middle school, or maybe a small community service where visitors receive a box of non-perishable food products. But in fact, in the 30 years that food banks have existed in our province, they have evolved significantly into multi-service agencies for community building and change. Over 60% of the food that we distribute is fresh or frozen, including milk, eggs, chicken, pork, beef, fruits, and vegetables. And over 90% of the food banks in our network provide services beyond emergency food support. I often think that food banks can be described as community-led services that offer programming based on their community's needs. As an example of some of these services, in our network, you can find food banks that provide accredited job training programs in partnership with local colleges and universities, job fairs and resume writing workshops, childcare, dental and health clinics, assistance with filing income taxes, as well as rent and hydro subsidy programs. They also work collaboratively with support and service providers in their communities to connect individuals with the additional support that they may need. But I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. Because before I do, I first wanted to provide one more piece of background information, which is what hunger looks like in our province and the need currently being met by this food bank network. It can often be hard to imagine that in a province like Ontario, there are so many people that go without food. But what our data tells us is that there are over 500,000 people accessing our food banks who visit more than 3 million times per year. 1 in 3 of those people is a child. To help quantify this for you, what this means is that in Ontario, someone visits a food bank every 10 seconds. What's more is this problem is increasing. Every year, we are seeing a greater need and an increase in the amount of visits each month. Understanding the key drivers for food bank use and making recommendations for change to provincial policymakers is a key part of our role at Feed Ontario and is what has led to the development of the Link2Feed program. Prior to Link2Feed, the client intake process varied between food banks. It seemed that every food bank had their own way of doing this, and most of it was done by hand. As I'm sure that many of you can imagine, recording demographic data for more than 500,000 people each year by hand is probably not something that we would define as efficient. To help address this, food banks in our network worked in partnership with a development organization on a new client intake system that would help streamline this process, as well as integrate aggregate demographic information to Feed Ontario at the provincial level in real time. This system became known as Link2Feed, and over the course of 3 years, it was rolled out to 1,200 agencies. What's more, Link2Feed has since developed into its own B Corps and is now utilized by food banks across all of North America. The rollout of Link2Feed has made a significant difference in our ability to understand food bank use in our province, as well as advocate for solutions that address the root causes of hunger and poverty in Ontario. One example you may have seen earlier this summer is the interactive map, here's a sneak peek, that we released, which reveals that hunger exists in every single electoral riding in Ontario. Link2Feed has also been used to inform the Cost of Poverty report, which we released yesterday, as well as ongoing studies like the Hunger Report. But in addition to this, and in equal measure, the implementation of Link2Feed was meant to improve the visitor experience when accessing a food bank. Link2Feed itself standardized client intake across the province, creating greater consistency to those who might visit multiple services throughout the year, as well as improved wait times through quicker data entry and through the ability to record visits. But this is an area where we thought could be even further improved, and that is what led to our partnership with Ontario 211. So a moment ago, I shared that Ontario's food banks provide a long list of services to those in their community, as well as work in partnership with additional service providers in their area to ensure that visitors have what they need to get back on their feet. In fact, currently 97% of the food banks in our network provide referrals on an ongoing basis, with Ontario 211 being their go-to source of information to provide this. To find these services, food banks would often keep both 211 and Link2Feed open in their browser, and which often means switching back and forth from windows, as well as printing multiple documents or copy and pasting from different windows into a Word document and then printing. Keeping in mind that Ontario's food banks are providing this service to over 500,000 people each year, we thought there might be an opportunity to improve this process. It was then that Feed Ontario, Link2Feed, and Ontario 211 began discussing how we might be able to work together to enhance referral services for those accessing our food banks. The solution itself was actually quite simple. The data and information provided by Ontario 211 is exactly what our food banks wanted and were using already. And they just needed a faster way to find and export this information during the client intake process. So, Feed Ontario worked with our database and our developers, Link2Feed, to integrate Ontario 211 directly into the Link2Feed system and smooth out the client intake process. During the process and interview, intake workers can now search directly within Link2Feed for additional services that might be of interest to the visitor. What's more is they can easily find the service requirements, as well as ensure that the client has everything they need prior to going to that service. For example, if someone is seeking legal advice from a community legal clinic, the intake worker is able to verify the information that the visitor may need in order to go to that appointment. This not only helps speed up the search process, but also saves individuals from having to schedule a second appointment if they didn't have everything the first time they went. Another neat feature neat feature between Ontario 211 and Link2Feed is that it allows users to search and select multiple services at one time. These services can be selected and exported into a single printable list for the visitor. While we have only just rolled out the program, preliminary results have indicated that this is really improving wait times as well as visitor experience. The Ontario 211 feature in Link2Feed is still very new. We actually only just rolled it out in May, but we are incredibly happy with the results that we are already seeing. To date, this is a feature that is currently being used by 278 food banks across the province, who say that the tool is easy to use, it is improving internal efficiencies and processes, providing more standardized referral information and lists, and further helping them meet their visitors' needs. Food banks are also really excited to be able to report on the referrals that they are providing. Provincially, it is still a little bit early for us to share insight into what their reports are telling us, but we look forward to being able to understand referrals better and to use this information as we work to grow and improve the capacity of our network. Thank you so much for having me and for your incredible work and partnership.